Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books Author Reading Series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
You doing all right?
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to talk for a bit. I feel like I should tell you all that our Southern California writer friend Robin Benway won the National Book Award for Young People's Literature today. So this is a good literary day in Los Angeles. So, Liska, we had talked about possibly reading a small chunk of this novel first, and then we'll talk for a bit, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So, are you still up for that?
Yes.
All right.
I'm a little sweaty, but thank you everyone for coming out. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So I don't mix it up with anybody else's copy. Okay. I'm going to read you the first chapter. My mom and sister were at the last bookstore event, so this is the second time you get to hear me try to read to a crowd. It's about 7 minutes long. Is that okay? Or I can shorten it too. It doesn't really matter. Okay.
Why are you asking me?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. So I used to do events at the last bookstore, so it's really weird to be up here. Also, I've been in this crowd like 100 times, so this feels weird. I might be dreaming. Maybe I'm in a coma. I don't know. All right. Don't wake me up if I am. It's just past breakfast, so I order up a pitcher of Bloody Marys and a bagel. I dash off a text to Mother. I've landed safely. Sorry I couldn't stay longer. The phone is a slick new thing, touch screen with buttons too small for my fingers, but still they make a satisfying click-click. Before I left New York, I bought a Gucci case for it. Alligator skin, because it was gaudy and expensive. And because I liked the idea of a decorative predator. I turned the ringer off and slipped the phone into one of the dresser drawers. The Miramar is a bougainvillea and jasmine hotel. Cobblestone circular drive, name in cursive on a black iron gate, golden California light spilling everywhere. My room faces the pier, and when I'm out on the balcony, it's like walking on the giant banyan and jumble of palm trees below. All the cocktails here are named after celebrities. You already can tell it takes place in California, right? The Capote is a mess of bourbon and mint. The Maryland has gin and a cherry. The Bloody Mary is the only one named for what it is. And after the last 2 days, it's exactly what I need. I had gone to Bakersfield because New York had turned on me. It felt treacherous. Everywhere reminders of him. I wanted somewhere I would feel safe, somewhere familiar. And said almost as soon as I got off the plane, I remembered why I left Bakersfield in the first place. Mother with her thin lipstick smile, how she reached out for my shoulder but took my bag instead, how she never asked how I was feeling, only said how thin I was, how great my skin looked. By the time she invited my older brothers over for Sunday dinner, something that never happened when I was around, but apparently became a tradition once they bought houses in the area, I was already looking up flights to Los Angeles. They showed up with their perky, two-of-a-kind wives and their darling demonic children. At first, they feigned surprise at seeing me, but then one did his best Donald Trump. "You're fired," he said, pushing his thinning hair to one side and pointing at me. His wife pinched him, saying, "Don't listen to him, hon, it's happening everywhere," while her boys tugged at her jeans, chanting, "Mom, Mom, Mom." In the kitchen, Mother wasn't just holding down the button on the blender. She was pulsing it, the ice for her margaritas crunching, between the kids chanting, "Mom, Mom." I took the first flight out that morning. Then it was just a short cab ride to Santa Monica. I try not to imagine the face Mother will make when she realizes I've left. I hang my dresses and blouses and slacks, calling up for more hangers. I arrange my shoes in the closet as if I'm moving in. I read over the dry cleaning services and note that they will press your socks free of charge. The bed is wide, a California king with a down comforter that puffs up around me like a hug, saying, "Just wait, just wait." I try not to think of how few options I have left, how being laid off feels like an end that rings on and on, how Eric did not ask me to stay, how in that last moment in his office, he did not stand up and say anything, just sat there, hand beside mine, close but not touching, until the human resources woman coughed politely and he moved it away. But let's not think of that. I look up at the ceiling where a fan made to look like a palm frond's turns in quiet arcs. Just beyond the eggshell walls is a bustling little beach city, my college town. Those days seem so long ago. Charlie and Jared are living in Santa Monica now. Southern California homeowners, for God's sake. Their wedding more than 6 years ago was the last time we were all together. Charlie, lovely in white lace, already making excuses for Jared with his sweaty upper lip, still hung over from his bachelor party. At the reception, the DJ announced Mr. and Mrs. Jared Brownstone to a cheering room, and Robby stood, whistling and clapping. Jared raised his arms above his head, a victorious gladiator, and the crowd ate it up. They're cheering thunderous. Someone stood on a chair and shouted into a megaphone. Others used the toy hand clappers with the bride's and groom's names written in white paint. I took a Xanax with champagne, telling myself to be quiet, to ignore that nervous flutter, silence that inner alarm. Just be content. Drink and be content. This can be enough for you too. You are married to your own college sweetheart. It has not even been a year. Give it time. Just wait. Charlie beaming, as she looked at me from across the room. A look of cul-de-sac contentment, a future filled with barbecues, pool parties, and play dates. This is enough for her, I thought. It is enough for them all. And then there was Robby, frowning at me because I asked the waiter for another glass of champagne. Because lately I'd been taking Xanax like Tic Tacs. But Robby, I thought, don't you want a happy little wife? I'm going to stop there. Because I'm too sweaty. Thanks, guys.
All right. So, we'll talk for about half an hour, thereabouts, and then we'll turn it over to some questions from all of you. Let's start with, sorry, okay.
Me? Yeah. Lean back. Oh, okay, I like it.
Right. There we go. So let's start with Elsa.
Cool.
Who is the narrator of the novel. I'm not going to ask you whether you are Elsa, because we're just talking about that. I know you're not Elsa. Anyway, but I'm interested in her as a character because she's a complicated protagonist, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to talk a little bit about the idea of writing about a complicated protagonist, a protagonist who kind of pushes against our sympathies at various points. I mean, let's just start. Why don't you just start talking about that, and then we'll kind of we'll converse.
It's been interesting. The book has been out, for a week now, but people had been reading it for a while up until then, with galleys and stuff. And I never really thought she'd come off as really unlikable. I always thought she was not sympathetic, but I thought she was just like a normal pissed off woman. And I thought we knew enough of those to not have it be considered unlikable. So that kind of surprised me. But then I started thinking about the book in terms as if you're reading her for the first time. And I thought, yeah, she's actually a very complex woman, right? Because you're reading her inner thoughts, which are very rage-filled. But her outer shell is sort of like a very level. She seems put together. She seems very effortless.
Helps.
Medication helps, yeah. So I think that's sort of where it comes from. That sort of, I guess, the tension that's created between those two things.
Right.
It sort of makes, I think, everyone who's reading the book think, why doesn't she just tell her friend that she's hurting or something like that? But I think it's not always the case.
She can't do it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think she's unlikable. That's why I was sort of dancing around the unlikable. And I also hate the idea that characters in fiction have to be likable.
Yeah, and I think it's applied more to women than it is to men.
Always
usually.
applied more to women, absolutely. I mean, Claire Massoud argued about this, 2-3 years ago when her last book came out. And all characters, I mean, not even characters, if we think about to writers, you're all just characters. So, every character in this room is likable or unlikable depending on the circumstance and depending on who they're
completely
engaged with. Right, that complexity is part of. So, were you thinking when you were writing her? Were you thinking about that question of? I mean, she is sympathetic, but she's also unsympathetic, even to those who are closest to her. I'm curious about kind of mining that emotional territory in terms of developing the character.
How I sat down and sort of came up with that.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Where do you get your wonderful ideas?
Well, I should say she isn't me, but I think the reason why it's you have to start there, right? It's because I am a young woman. I do live in Los Angeles. I have worked in a museum. So
You've been to Catalina.
I've been to Catalina. I've done drugs. And I like to drink. But I think that's sort of the stopping point, but it's she's definitely a vehicle for a lot of the emotions that I feel. So there's a tremendous amount of honesty that's in the book, but she's not me, I guess is the easiest way to say. So when I started writing her, I had just left the Getty Research Institute. I was a special collections library assistant for 5 years. And when I started that job, I thought that was going to be sort of it for me. I mean, it was a wonderful job. I had access to all these very rare objects and papers. I think one of my first jobs there as a work study student was I photocopied impressionist letters that painters wrote each other, impressionist painters. And I thought, oh my God, why are they letting me hold these things and put them in a photocopy machine? But like, that was my job. But 5 years into it, there had been layoffs. There had been. It just really became a regular job. It was just like any other job, and I left there very disillusioned, thinking, well, where do I go from here? I left at 30 years old. It was around the time just after the recession, so there was a lot of people that were like that too, not just women, men also. So when I sat down, I think a lot of my disillusionment and anger came out in Elsa's voice. And then I just wanted to know why specifically was she so pissed off? Mm-hmm. And that was, I guess, where the fiction takes over.
Right. I mean, you wrote about that great essay about the Man Ray,
yes.
The Man Ray archive, or the Man Ray documents,
yeah.
which was there.
David helped me write that essay.
I just read it and gave you some notes. It was all you. But so there, so that aspect, and of course, I of course have no experience with this in my professional life, but institutions can be really disillusioning if you work for them.
Yes, well, yeah. The art world, I feel like, was really disillusioning because it's the art world, right? It's where we all go to find solace when, at least for me, when, I see one of my coworkers from the Getty back there. But, hi. But I really, it's where you go to, to really, like I said, take solace from the world. It's whenever the world's sort of crazy, I go to the museums, and so I really thought, well, where do I want to work for the rest of my life? And I thought, definitely the art world, right? And to find out that there's the same, it's just humanity everywhere. So it's just the same thing. And that was really disheartening, I think.
So let's talk about the character. I mean, in terms of that exploration of a character, how much did you know about where Elsa was going and where the narrative was going when you started? How much is mapped out? How much did you kind of let develop by accretion?
I like to write by coming up with the characters and then sort of sticking them all in a place where they bounce off each other. Mm-hmm. So I immediately knew I wanted these specific characters, and I thought, well, where could they not get away from each other? On a boat.
So you're torturing the character.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of the plot for me, or the storyline, comes from just getting I have to really get to know the characters really well, otherwise it doesn't really work. Which is why the ending, when we talk about the ending, was so difficult, right? Because you can you can put people in a situation and watch them bounce off each other as much as you want, but eventually you have to end the book. So that was my learning curve on writing a novel.
Right. It reminds me of an old New Yorker cartoon I liked, where there's a guy sitting at a desk surrounded by papers, and his wife is at the top of the stairs, and he's leaning up, yelling at her, and the caption is, "Finish it. Why would I want to finish it?"
I know. Yeah. Because I really got to know all these characters. Yeah. Not that. So I started when I went into how David and I know each other is I went to the University of California, Riverside Palm Desert MFA program. Yeah. And he was my nonfiction professor. So when I took the book into the program, it was a novella, and I showed it to Mary Otis in my first workshop, and she was like, "This is great, but it's 75 pages." And I think Mark Haskell Smith was like, "You don't sell a novella, turn this into a book."
Right.
So I
think I read a version.
I think you did too. Yeah. Embarrassingly,
I
left it in like his mailbox and was like, "Tell me what you think."
Did I ever tell you what I thought?
No, thank God. Because it was terrible.
It was spectacular.
Shut up. Now it is. So I'm so embarrassed that I did that. It was all Gom's fault. But he, so what I learned was I had to get to know Elsa more, right? And not just Elsa. Like I felt like I really understood who she was because we shared a lot of the same anger and the same outlooks on life and stuff. But the other characters, I really needed to know who they were also. So a lot of my time at UCRPD was sort of coming to terms with them and figuring out who they were.
Well, so I have a couple of questions about this. First, let's talk about the other characters. Then I want to talk about expanding it from the novella, because those are both treacherous territories for a writer, right? And so first with the other characters, I agree with you, and I think, that development of those other characters, I don't want to say it's easy to write from inside a first-person persona, because that would imply that it's easy to write, but or that there's any joy in it whatsoever. But there are affinities, right? I mean, you're writing from within that voice. When you're writing about other characters, especially through a first-person filter, it's not the same as writing about them in third person. You've got to develop them, but only through the eyes of that first-person narrator. So I wonder if we can talk a little bit, because those characters, the character who I have to say I kind of fell in love with in the book is Charlie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I love finding out who people identified with, because I think they're, I kind of want to, has anybody read the book in here? Yeah? Okay. Yay. David's book. Come on, guy, wake up. No.
It's a book, it's got some title, it's an island somewhere off the coast of California.
But I do find that a lot of people identify with different characters in it. And the way I sort of got into the other characters' heads, one of the first things Mary had me do actually in the workshop was sort of write outside of the book. So like, what does Charlie's room look like? What does Robby's room look like? What does Jared's room look like? What do they like when nobody's in the room? So I would sort of like sketch scenes watching them, I guess, which is sort of creepy, but that's how I sort of got into their heads. And I started thinking afterwards when I finished the book that I thought I could rewrite the entire book from Charlie's perspective. That's how well I know her.
Right.
Actually, because it's a completely different book.
Right, no, and she comes off, I mean, they all come off as fully realized characters. I think she, maybe more so than others, because she's got that long-term best friendship.
Yes, definitely.
With Elsa, right? Yeah. So you're also portraying, for me, one of the really interesting things is that idea of a friendship with history. And so I wonder if we can talk a little bit about that, too.
Yeah.
The idea of, they knew each other, they haven't seen each other for a long time. There is a lot of kind of unresolved stuff, but they also have known each other since they were kids. Since they were kids. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think for the sort of surface of the book for Elsa is this sort of breakup she's had with her boss, right? She's had an affair with him. So it sort of seems like it's a book about relationships between men and women. She's even there with her ex-husband. But it's actually really a book about female friendships, I think. You don't just have Charlie and Elsa have a huge history, and I think female friendships sort of start under the skin and then they just go deeper.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah.
Because as a man, male friendships, they start on the surface, they stay on the surface.
Well, I think women, for relationships even with your significant other, for women, when somebody becomes part of your identity, teaches you things, how Eric has sort of fostered Elsa's art, knowledge. Women, I think, really foster each other. And that they sort of become a part of each other's identities. And so to pull apart or to have friendships move on from each other is incredibly painful. Right. And I don't think women know how to, at least I don't know how to politely move away. I think women just tend to be like, I guess Facebook friends now is the easiest way to do it, right? We stop hanging out, but we're still friends on Facebook, and that doesn't really mean any, thing, but it's an unsaid thing. So I think for Charlie and Elsa, Charlie is lost, right? She really needs a friend. Elsa is also lost and hurting and doesn't want anyone else inside. And that's just a recipe for disaster for them both, right?
And they're both, in a way, different ways. Charlie is very overtly longing for Elsa, right? Several times in the book she says, don't go away for 5 years, don't stay away for 5 years, or she mentions the amount of time that it's been. Elsa, very different. Also, in a way, longing, but somehow less able to access
I think with Elsa, her background with women, I think she says at one point, Charlie has a little sister who, she tells a story in the book about Charlie's little sister sort of hurting Charlie in a situation, sort of betraying her. And she sleeps with her boyfriend on it. I don't think that's giving too much away. But Elsa thinks about how Charlie was so surprised and upset by this, and Elsa sort of thinks, I've never thought sisterhood should be something that you hold that close to yourself. That's always sort of like snakes in the water. Best to just get out of the water altogether. Right. So I think she's always sort of kept herself to herself. Yeah. Right? Which is part of her tragedy. She's always going to be alone. And the whole book is her sort of hoping she's not going to be alone,
But
right?
it's also part of her, it's part of her tragedy, but it's part of her personality.
Exactly,
right?
yes.
I mean,
And it's very heavily, it's in there. I mean, there's a lot of with how women are raised too, with Elsa specifically, right? Her mother was, worked in a salon, so there's a lot of beauty in there, which fosters female competition. And I think that there's a lot of those kind of walls for Elsa that she can't really pull down. And that's just her, that's so sad for Charlie, because she's never going to be able to have that kind of friendship with Elsa.
Right, or perhaps with anyone at this
With
point.
anybody. Oh, yeah. By the time you get to the end.
So let's talk about expanding it. So that idea, I mean, that's a risky move, right? You write a piece, there's a piece of writing, it has a shape, whether, however it's working or not.
Yeah.
It's got a shape. The idea of taking a piece of writing, even a piece that's 75 pages long, and expanding it into something that's
240
pages long. So, that's 2/3, whatever, 3 times. Really bad at math. The bourbon's not helping. But
you should have seen me doing math for that cocktail. I was just like, sure.
Yeah, a Bissell and a bit.
Yeah.
But okay, so so can we talk a little bit about that process? Both, the excitation of it, maybe the trepidation of it. How did you go about it?
I think the nicest thing was I was doing it in the program in the UCR. So it wasn't like I was by myself, which I think would have been a lot scarier. I was in a very safe place where I was working with professors who were really sort of supporting me and respecting the work, which I think, I don't know if that happens in every program. Hello. But, it was really nice to feel like I had room to I guess fuck up, right? Like I could go off in the wrong.
Encouraged, hopefully. You're encouraged to fuck up,
completely, yeah. So just I think one of the things I heard constantly was just keep writing. Just keep writing, right? You can edit down later. And because I had sort of the beginning, middle, and end, what I didn't have was why is Elsa doing these things, right? And what was interesting was as I started to figure it out, I was like, oh, well, then this would happen in this area, right? Like, so here's another scene, because if I find out that she's a certain way with Charlie, that creates a different dynamic on the boat. So I have to go and rewrite that scene, and it's much larger now. So, when I left that program, I had a full manuscript, and I got an agent, a lovely agent. So it was like a wonderful experience.
So you went to the program, you wrote a manuscript, you got an agent, you got it published.
Yeah.
So this is the value of education.
Yeah, I mean, and I had. It's funny, but I had been working on it. I think now it's been about 4 years, almost a little more than 4 years. Yeah, right. It was a long process and I've learned a lot about writing a book. I started writing the second book, and I was able to bang out a first draft in 6 weeks.
Okay, so let's talk about what you've learned about writing.
Yes.
I'm curious, and then I want to move into talking about. Well, then we can figure out how to talk about the end without spoiling it for everybody. But what have you learned about? I mean, what did it teach you? How did it play out in terms of the draft of the second book?
This actually has a lot to do with the ending.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a nice lead-in. I'll just do both at once. But what I learned was your characters. I really thought I had the characters down. After I had done all this writing and during the program and stuff, I thought, okay, well, this is where I want Elsa to end up, which was such a sort of jokes on me thing, because she's going to do whatever she wants to do. I just had to sort of follow her. That sounds so silly, but that's really what, I kept trying to push her in the happy ending, I guess. And I realized that wasn't working. With a lot of help, I realized that wasn't working. But so I guess I realized that you kind of just have to go where the characters are taking you a bit more and trust them.
Right.
Which is funny, because even with the second book, I'm still sort of circling the ending, but at least now I know. It just means that I haven't completely developed my characters in order to know where the ending is going to be.
Right. Do you think that you were inclined to a happy ending because of your own feelings for the character? You wanted her to have that? Do you think that you were inclined towards that ending because of your sort of, the expectation of how a book's supposed to work in some sense, combination thereof?
Like no one would read it if it was a total depressing. Well, actually, it was because Elsa comes from a long line of sort of beautiful messes, right? Like women who are on the edge.
This is great. This is leading to my next question. You're doing all my work.
Good. So, Joan Didion's Mariah Wyeth. My biggest influence is Jean Reese characters.
Yeah.
And Jean Reese wrote a book called Good Morning Midnight, which I adored. I read it in college. And I thought, well, I'm going to write an updated narrative of this, which is sort of where Elsa came from. But I wanted to prove that she would have a happy ending, right? And it was so sad. Like, I kept having people be like, no, she should kill herself. And I was like, no, it's 2017. Come on.
It's really hard for a first-person narrator to kill themselves, though, because who finishes the story? Yeah, right? You can do it. But.
But rightly, how do you do that without having it be like just full violin the whole time? So, but people, I really didn't want her to end up punished the same way every one of these female characters, in the 70s and the 30s and the 20s has to be punished, right?
Little Daisy Buchanan too.
Yeah, little Daisy Buchanan, definitely. Actually, Lady Brett Ashley was what I wanted. I wanted. Yes. So I really wanted to be like, no, it's 2017. Women can fuck up and come out on the other side. And realizing that that's not true was such a bummer. It was such a bummer. I was like, no, you're right. I think it was Dara who was like, Liska, no, she doesn't get to ride off into the sunset. And I was like, really? You're right. So that was kind of a bummer.
Although, it's interesting. I mean... I know, there's a although I know, but it's actually, I read it that way. I read it as sort of...
I guess...
I didn't read it as going either way.
Oh, okay.
Which actually, but again, I think that, what that tells us is, we bring our reader animates the book, so, right?
I don't know if it's a happy ending. I don't know if it's what Elsa would consider a happy ending, I guess.
Right, but I do think it is open. It's just, my reading of it is because I tend towards the... unhappy ending. I believe in the unhappy ending.
Well, yeah,
Right, but I'm interested in that idea that it is kind of open. I mean, are we doing a good enough job of kind of talking about it while talking around it?
Yeah. Kelsey says yes.
And I kind of like. I mean, I'm curious about that idea of an ending that is both resolves the kind of.
Oh, it feels satisfying.
Resolves the book, right? Structurally resolves the book, but at the same time, it's kind of open. We don't quite. We don't even know exactly what's going to happen in the next second. Yeah,
I wanted this book to be very honest. I wanted it to be from the beginning. Like it's funny to me people calling it California noir and stuff because I'm like, but this is just how I see. This is just Los Angeles. Like I don't know how noir that is. It's just reality. So, and I think that's part of the ending, right? But it's hard to give an ending to reality, right? Like the reality is death, right? That's the end. But that's not a satisfying ending in a book, So it was difficult to find a satisfying ending. I think to find something that felt like, oh, this is a natural conclusion. And I don't know how. I was driving with my husband once, and I don't want to give it away, but I saw the scene that I wrote at the end. And I thought, holy shit, that's the ending. Right. And I got home and I wrote it out and I was like, yeah, this feels
How far in
right.
were you? I mean, at what point were you in the drafting of the book when that happened?
Dara and I were already working together.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting was it always ended the way I wanted it to. But I needed to find the right, last few sentences to make it feel right. But I really, especially, you know what it was, too, why I wanted a happy ending? As I got to know Elsa more and more, I was like, no, I really want more for you than this.
Right. But, it is open. Also, I think it's an interesting thing. There's, Eudora Welty once said, when you're in the middle of working on something, everything, you're on the bus, you overhear something, and it's the perfect line of dialogue that you were missing,
yes.
right? The entire universal lines in a certain way. Around you.
Some of my favorite parts of the book were I'm washing my hair, and then I'm like, holy fucking shit, get this out of my hair. Get me a towel on and, start typing, I've
run naked from the shower many times. My wife's like, what are you doing? I was like, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
Write this down. I'll lose it.
Yes.
Einstein apparently got all of his best ideas in the shower, or at least that's what I've heard.
I don't know what it is about that, but that happens.
I have a theory, but we'll save that for another time.
It's the next book.
Right. It has to do with alpha waves or beta waves. It's the repetitive physical motion.
Really?
That's It's walking, doing the dishes. All
I
of
thought
those
it was just taking a break and walking away.
Physical repetitive activity rewires your.
I like that. Okay,
yeah.
Wash the dishes more. Is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's Jordan?
Right.
He's in the back. Yeah.
Dust. So what did I want to... That just blew the last
Woman
question,
on the Edge?
question.
Was that
Yeah,
what
Women
you
on the
mean?
Edge,
Okay.
right, Women on the Edge. So let's talk a little bit about those, because the book is very... it's not steeped in its antecedents, but it's definitely kind of knowing about its antecedents,
Yeah.
or let's say about its place, its lineage in a certain sense.
Yes.
So I wonder, can we talk a little bit about how you see it in that lineage?
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned Daisy Buchanan, because originally I made this playlist. I write to music, and originally I made this playlist of all like early jazz. Mm-hmm. And the book sounded so like I was writing a historical. Hey, how's it going? Like Tom was saying way too many like baby and
Old Sport.
Yeah, Old Sport. He was like that close, and I was like, okay, no, change the playlist, because I really wanted the biggest influences were Sasha Jensen, which was for Good Morning Midnight, and Jean Reese's Heroine, but all of her heroines are pretty much the same protagonist. And actually, Lady Brett Ashley was a huge one. Mm-hmm. I read that book the same time I read Good Morning Midnight, which is interesting because they were around the same time. Just one's sort of a male perspective and one's a female perspective of Paris. And I always thought Lady Brett Ashley, it must have been so exhausting to be her, just having... right? Like, what's his name in it? I can't even remember the main character. Jake's just constantly just like, fawning over her, and everyone's fawning over her. And she's so beautiful, and I just thought, God, that just must be so lonely to be you.
Right.
Which is sort of why Elsa ended up being, she has to be gorgeous. But she's also kind of on the edge, not as much as Jean Reese's characters or Mariah Wyeth also.
Right.
That's a huge, one that people like to point out, especially because she's also Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So writing in LA is hard because LA is just steeped in so much fictional sort of lore, I guess, which is why I think immediately people can label it as, California Noir, Jean Reese, or,
Right.
Joan Didion. So and coming from an MFA background and an English background, I have an English degree too, I'm very well aware that I'm not the first person to be doing this, but all I could do was be honest from my own world and sort of tell my own story.
But this is the genius of setting it in Catalina.
Oh, thank you.
It's
Yeah,
the-
there
it's
is
the
no
great,
Catalina
You've written the
book.
great Catalina novel.
Yeah, thank you. When I went to SCIBA, which is a trade show, Southern California Independent Booksellers Association, and there were librarians from Catalina, and they were like, oh my God, we're so excited about this book. Would you ever come out to Catalina? And I was like, yes. When and where? But also read it first and make sure you still want me to come. But yeah, it's really kind of, where Catalina came from was, I thought, working at the Getty, you can see it all the time from up there, sort of looking at you. And then when you're actually there, you have this weird, bizarre sort of outer body experience of seeing Los Angeles and like where you live. It's this very sort of like you're catching this image of yourself in the mirror, and then you look and you're like, oh, it's just me. So I always kind of wanted to set it there.
Yeah, and being on an island, even an island that close, is a strange experience.
It's such a weird place.
Yeah.
Have you guys all been there? It's really weird. Avalon is like this very touristy town, right? This is paradise, come into paradise, drink Mai Tais. And then Two Harbors, which is just on the other side, there's one restaurant, one bar, and a camping site, and one hotel, I think. And, when I camped there, little Catalina Island foxes, which are like the size of a house cat, would come out. Bison would come down from the hill. So it's this weird sort of, it's got the same duality that Los Angeles has, right? Where you have Hollywood, and then you have coyotes coming down from the Santa Monica Mountains.
Right.
Mountain lions are still out here.
Yeah.
So I like that. I thought that's the perfect place for them to go.
So I want to ask one or two more questions and then turn it over. So one of the things that really interests me about the book, and I think works really well, is that it is, and I mean this in the best possible way, it's claustrophobic, right? In the sense that Elsa's life is claustrophobic. Not just, she's sort of wrapped in her own head and her own kind of memory and loss. Then you put them on the boat, which is by nature claustrophobic, and then they end up on an island. And it's this very small group that has a lot of history for the most part, not everybody, but for the most part, and all the history is unresolved. So all of those ghosts are kind of floating there as well. So I just wanted to talk about that. It's a ripe mixed for high drama, right? But I wanted to talk a little bit about that as a, again, we touched on it a little, but I want to come back to that as a kind of conscious aesthetic choice in terms of driving the narrative and really kind of foregrounding the dynamics between the characters.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with the characters themselves, like the positions. It's all about sort of the roles that they each are inhabiting and how they can't really break them because society doesn't really let you, I guess. So Charlie and Jared are married. Jared's supposed to be this really successful businessman, right? Robby's an ex-husband, and so they all sort of, a lot of the drama and tension comes from them not being able to say how they really feel.
Right. But do you think that's, it's certainly society, but it's also, in some way, the nature of their relationships with each other, right?
Yeah.
They know each other in a certain way, and they're locked into their own imaginations of each other.
Yeah, and I think from as soon as you read that they're all going to go on a boat, you're like, well, this is going to... Yeah, it's sort of like watching a train wreck in slow motion, right? I think that's part of the appeal, is you can't look away, because it starts out with, the first sentence is Elsa ordering a pitcher of margarita, or Bloody Marys, so she's off and running,
Right, she's already there. Right?
Yeah, she's already there.
And she stays there throughout. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's exactly right. And you also, I think there's something really interesting about the tension, because it doesn't always, in fact, for most of the book, it doesn't quite explode, right?
No,
it sort of gets to the edge sometimes, and then
it
gets pulled back.
Well, and also I think there's this idea that they're all on vacation, which is so bizarre to me, that they're all like, vacation for these people are being on a sailboat and drinking a whole lot. And there's one scene where when Jared and Robby are like, we're kings, and they're doing like push-ups on the boat. Yeah. There's a lot of like wealth, I think, also in the book, right? That they're all like trying to get money and have certain things and stuff like that, which is, this idea of like projecting a certain image, right?
Right, but it masks a kind of spiritual blankness.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you're reading it knowing, I think most people know people like these characters.
Right.
So you almost, I think, as soon as you see them on the page, you're like, oh shit, I know how this is going to play out.
Right. I'm going to have Thanksgiving dinner with some of these people, I think. So,
yeah.
All right. Should we open it up to some questions from the assembled? Anyone want to raise your hand? We'll call on you. And
don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
Hello.
I was so afraid you were going to give away the ending. Thank you.
I hope I did a good job talking around it.
I wanted to ask you, when you started the process of writing this book, did you already have in your mind the beginning, the middle, and the end?
Because I was sort of thinking of doing this play on it being a modern version of Jean Rhys's book, I did. But that totally got away from me almost as soon as I started writing it, I think. But the ending was sort of, I always knew who she would end up with. That's the most I'll give away with that. Based off that book, actually. Yes?
You talked about you have a playlist when you write.
Yes.
Do you read while you write? Are there authors you go to?
That's a good question, because I was in an MFA program, so I had to read a lot. And that, I think, really actually helped the book. When I'm in revision, I don't. So like when I was working with Dara or my editor and I've gotten notes and it's time for me to like not talk to anybody for 4 weeks or shower, then, or do nothing, then I only listen to music and I don't read. But I think a lot of the books I read in my MFA program, particularly, we were talking about Marita Wolf earlier, and how she wrote this book called Sudden Rain, which takes place in Los Angeles also in the 70s. It's wonderful. You guys should read it.
Right, so it takes place over a long weekend, so
it is.
Structurally it's not
Yes, yeah. Well, and how she treats all of her characters. It's written in third person, so it really helped me. You know how you were asking about how do I get into the other characters and move them around? That book actually helped a whole lot.
Yeah.
And what was did I answer all of them?
What did you like? What is like?
Oh, my playlist. There's actually one song in particular that I sit down and listen to every time I worked on the book. It is called, it's so weird to tell you guys this because I've listened to it, I checked and I listened to it like 700 times or something. So, but for me, it's like a quick way for me. You know how scents quickly make people remember things? Music does that for me. So it's a really easy way, but I can't listen to the song any other time because I just have to go right back into writing. It's Grizzly Bear and Feist's Service Bell.
Sing it.
Hell no. Hell no. Not enough drinks in the world. That's the highest note you'll get out of me is no. But yeah, that was the song I always listened to. And then I have a few different albums that I would play after that. But as the book changed, more different albums would come on. Rewrites were funny because I listened to like a lot of Gefestelstein. Is that what you call it? Oh, where's Jordan? I don't know what it's called. But it's like, what's it called? Gefestelstein? That German band? Gestaffelstein, which is like hardcore German techno. Because, I had to pretend like I'm just smoking cigarettes. Just like, okay, you're in the zone. Just keep rewriting. Edits are going. You can do this. So it changed. But that song, every time I sat down, I had to listen to it. And take half of Vicodin. Just kidding.
And drink champagne. Other questions?
It's kind of for both of you. So I've read all your interviews and been here for all this, and I've heard multiple people ask you if you are Elsa. If you were a man, do you think people would ask you
No.
if you were your character? Even if the character was the men get asked that question?
I was saying, are there children in this room?
No.
Okay. I was saying earlier before this, right, that there's a great John Irving quote where I guess he got asked too many times about whether he was GARP, and he said anybody who asks you if your novel is autobiographical doesn't understand how to read fucking fiction.
Yeah. I think part of it is that I'm a debut author, and so a lot of people haven't read anything else I've written, so it's a very easy question to be like, well, how much is this you? And also, Elsa, it's first person, so by the end of it, hopefully you feel like you really know her. So it seems like you'd want to be like, oh, do I know you already? Because I've read your book. Part of it's true. I mean, you know how angry I am probably about how women are treated, but for the most part, no, I'm not her. I've had it done. I've done a couple interviews where it's, a guy interviewing and they are like, are you Elsa? Well, how much of Elsa are you? Yeah. Would you like another cocktail? And I'm like, no.
I've got some Vicodin.
But that's a good question. I talked to another author, Rachel Kong of Goodbye Vitamin, and she and I had a conversation for the MCD website where she also was asked that continually, doing the same. She was a debut author also. It was her first novel, and she and I both agreed that no, it's I think something for women where people think, oh well, you probably don't have much of an imagination, but you can write. Yeah. But men are lovely. So next question. Anyone else?
Other questions?
Anyone?
I have one more question.
Yes.
When you write, do you write for a specific amount of time, or do you just get drained after 30 minutes, or does it just depend?
That's an interesting question. I think so. Because I wrote this book during an MFA program and with my agent, with my editor, it was spread out over a long period of time. So I was, it was very structured, I guess. With the second book, it was like, okay, sit down, write your first draft, and you already have an agent who will read it, and you already have an editor. So it wasn't as structured. So I was sort of up to my own devices to see how long I would sit there and write. And because I wrote every single day for way too long, I actually, I forgot what this is called, but like the sort of fluid between my joint leaked out. But I did write that book in about 6.5 weeks. There will be rewrites, of course, but so I haven't really found like a healthy way to do that routine, because in my mind, this is my only job. So as my husband goes to work for 8 hours a day, so should I be writing 8 hours a day. And sometimes I work on the weekends too. But that's only when I actually have a deadline, I think, also. Otherwise, I can do what I want.
And I think deadlines are key, right?
Yes,
because
definitely.
Not whether in a program or whether whether you're writing because you have a book due or whatever. I mean, one of the reasons I was a journalist for so long was because I cannot write without a deadline.
Yeah, deadlines are wonderful. Yeah, and I mean, when I'm on deadline, it's like button chair time. And I love it. It makes me a little bit like psychotic a little bit because I'm just sitting there. I got my headphones on. I'm making a playlist. I go deep, but I love it. It's fun.
All right, so I'm privy to this information, but I've seen your story for it.
Oh.
Talk about your storyboarding a little bit.
Yeah, so I don't plot. I don't like write out what's going to happen, when, or something like that. Like I said, all I do is I try to get to know characters. So I have a board above my desk where I cast all the different people, not in actors and actresses, because I have different ideas already associated with them. I take hair magazines and cut out people from them, and then I can project personalities on them because Emma Stone has already too much to her, but somebody who's like modeling a short haircut or something, I'm like, I don't know who you are, you're Elsa now. But then I also do pictures of settings and stuff like that. The second book that I'm working on takes place in Rome and Puglia, so I have two sides of the boards. One's Rome, one's Puglia, but I also do colors too to sort of quickly get me back there and stuff like that. It helps, that and music. Do you have a question? I keep saying.
Yeah. How is your publisher? I think they're trying to sort of forge an identity for themselves. How do you fit in?
MCD. Yeah, so MCD is sort of the new publisher with FSG, for Strauss and Giroux, and I love them. I love the idea that they're doing something new, especially in the publishing world. That they want to do, I think, what is it, like new voices and voices that aren't seen and stuff. It was so flattering for them to have that be their guidelines and then them to be like, you fit in perfectly. So I think it's hard for me to answer that because I'm still getting used to the idea that they even wanted to publish this book. This whole year, I'm just like, well, what? This last year, anyways, I just kept thinking, oh, they're going to take that back. I'm sure. You haven't finished reading it. You'll finish it, and then you'll be like, just kidding, you're not for me. But so far, everything they've put out has been brilliant. And I'm just completely flattered that I'm a part of it.
It's whatever the editor wants.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Do you mean like their vision for it? Sean's vision for it, and Daphne's. I think it's sort of. I think they felt this is between everyone here. This is how I saw it. FSG has been around for a really long time, and they've done wonderful work. But they wanted to have a label that they could experiment with, right? To do new voices, to see how they see the world and stuff like that. Not so, I don't want to say FSG stuffy or anything like that. They're wonderful, but it's. I think it's just a way for them to play, right? Thank God they do, right? For me, anyways. Yeah. So it was funny when they said experimental because I thought this was a pretty, it's a linear book. But then now that it's out in the world and I'm sort of getting the reaction that I'm getting, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess this is kind of pretty experimental to have a woman this pissed off and doing what she wants, right? Which is probably why I had so much trouble in the beginning to find people to invest their time in the book. So I think that's sort of their guidelines right now, which is cool.
What are the good hair magazines?
CVS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just any literary magazine.
Yeah. I do that too, actually, yeah. Yeah.
So when you were talking about it being experimental or her being angry, were you ever intimidated by Elsa? Because Elsa can be intimidating to a lot of the characters in the book.
That's a good question. No, because I felt her pain so much. I just felt like, she was hurting so much. And the tragedy of her is, so one of the things that I learned working at the Getty, it's such a beautiful place, but it's so removed up on that hill. And I sort of realized there's this thing that happens when you're looking at art, this distance that's created between you and what you're viewing. And Elsa's this beautiful woman, so her entire life is this interaction with the world from that position where she's the piece of art. So she's very lonely and can't ever really get past and make that connection or that relationship. So I always felt of her that way, that every tragedy that happens, yes, it's her own making, but sort of, I don't know if it's all her fault. I sort of feel like it's the world around her. So.
Should we take one more? Is there one more to be taken?
Any more?
All right. Should we buy a bunch of books?
Yes, come
All
and
right,
say
let's
hi.
buy a bunch of
Thanks,
books.
guys.
Thank you, Liska
Thank
Jacobs.
you, David. Thank you. I have to say real quick.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books Author Reading Series. Don't forget that you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Today's music was provided by Young Jesus. You can check them out at youngjesus.bandcamp.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.